Prince Andrew, Duke of York, has faced heavy criticism and serious allegations over the last few years linked to his association with the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The most damaging accusation comes from Virginia Giuffre, who alleges that she was trafficked by Epstein and forced to be with Prince Andrew on 3 separate occasions between 2001 and 2002. She was 17 years old at the time. These encounters allegedly took place in London, New York, and Epstein's private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Prince Andrew has consistently denied these allegations, stating that he has no recollection of meeting Giuffre. In 2019, Prince Andrew gave a high-profile interview with the BBC's Newsnight to address these allegations. During the interview, he denied the accusations but provided explanations that were widely criticized. For instance, he claimed he was at a pizza restaurant on one of the dates in question and said he did not sweat at the time, countering Giuffre's claim that he had been sweating heavily during their alleged encounter. The interview was seen as beyond damaging, and Prince Andrew subsequently stepped down from his royal duties. In August of 2021, Giuffre filed a civil lawsuit against Prince Andrew in the U.S. The lawsuit alleged abuse and sought damages. Prince Andrew's legal team initially attempted to have the case dismissed, but a U.S. judge ruled in January of 2022 that the lawsuit could proceed. By February 2022, it was announced that Prince Andrew had reached a financial settlement with Giuffre to resolve the lawsuit. While the terms of the settlement were not disclosed, media reports suggested it was substantial. Importantly, the settlement did not constitute an admission of guilt. As part of the agreement, Andrew also pledged to make a significant donation to Giuffre's charity for victims' rights. Prince Andrew's friendship with Epstein has been a source of significant controversy. He visited Epstein's properties, and photographs of the two together raised eyebrows. A photo of Andrew with his arm around Giuffre alongside Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's former associate, became central to the allegations. Prince Andrew has questioned the authenticity of the photo, but has not provided conclusive evidence that it was in fact doctored. Following the settlement, Prince Andrew has largely stayed out of the public eye. He's been stripped of his royal patronages and military titles. And there has been significant ongoing speculation about his future presence within the royal family. When is it appropriate for him to show up? When should he stay behind closed doors? But it is important to note that no criminal charges have ever been brought against him, and he continues to deny any wrongdoing. Prince Andrew's poor judgment will be revisited this month through Amazon's A Very Royal Scandal miniseries, which explores the events leading up to and following the infamous 2019 BBC Newsnight interview. We spoke to Barry Levine, author of The Spider Inside the Criminal Web of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, about Hollywood's fascination with Prince Andrew and this story. Hi all, Kinsey Schofield here with Barry Levine, author of The Spider Inside the Criminal Web of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Barry, you were the very first person I thought of when I saw the trailer for A Very Royal Scandal, which explores the events leading up to and following the infamous 2019 BBC Newsnight interview that effectively ended Prince Andrew's royal career. I guess, first of all, I'd like your initial reaction to that trailer.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it is for those of us who have been digging into the Jeffrey Epstein story, including his bizarre association with Prince Andrew and so many others, Donald Trump and Bill Clinton and so forth. I think every work that's done, even if it's a theatrical piece of work, is important to the overall understanding of this, very sordid subject. But I think it continues to, these films and these theatrical presentations continue to shine a light on just a horrible individual who took advantage of so many young women and victimized them, destroyed their childhoods, and we get to see the the damage and the fallout from some of the individuals who were caught up in Jeffrey Epstein's web, as I wrote in The Spider. Certainly, Prince Andrew was one of them. What made the film scoop important for me was that even though it was the movie version of the interview, we did get to see Andrew reacting to the very specific questions. And I think in line of the transcript interview, I think they did a very good job in terms of sticking with that for the most part. In the film, of course, it was speeded up a bit, and we didn't see all of it. But what you have to remember here is Emily's interview with Prince Andrew on Newsnight will remain on the record as his only public comments about this scandal. Yeah. He avoided interview requests from the FBI. He turned down investigators from the New York Southern District when they were pursuing both Ghislaine Maxwell and, previous to that, Jeffrey Epstein, before Jeffrey Epstein died in jail awaiting trial. Prince Andrew cut a deal to avoid having to testify in the Virginia Giuffre civil lawsuit that was filed a couple of years back here in New York, which would have held him, at least civilly, would have absolutely opened up his involvement with Epstein, and specifically Virginia's 3 allegations of being raped by him, their 3 sexual meetings that took place on the island, in the Virgin Islands, in New York, here, and also at Ghislaine Maxwell's townhouse in London. So Andrew has never been held accountable in the sense from a prosecutor, from a lawyer, to answer specific questions. All we have, and I think probably all we'll have going into history, is this particular interview. So in terms of the overall case, it's highly, highly significant. And certainly Andrew, as it has been called, the train wreck interview, public relations disaster, he just continued to just tangle himself up in knots. And it gave us a preview of, if he was ever held accountable in a real interview or deposition by a seasoned lawyer or a prosecutor, it very well could have led to criminal charges against him.
Yeah, catastrophic. Yes. I mean, absolutely. Well, one of the questions I had for you was, why are all of these programs being made right now? It's almost silly, this competing movie versus this mini series. Yes. Is it a form of holding Prince Andrew accountable? Do you think, or is it just so salacious that you have to take advantage of it?
Well, I think there's some stories that have captured the public's attention. Certainly in a true crime story, we've never experienced anything like the Jeffrey Epstein story here in the U.S. and the various connections around the world. Not only did you have Prince Andrew in England, you also had
Kevin Spacey.
Well, you had all the Hollywood folks, you had all the politicians involved, but you also had the offshoots of the model fixer Jean-Luc Brunel in France, who ended up taking his life behind bars. So the tentacles of the Epstein story have splintered all over the world. Not to mention all the things that took place in the Virgin Islands and the district attorney there holding Jeffrey Epstein's estate accountable and forcing them to pay out hundreds of millions of dollars in compensation to all of the victims. So this is a story, not only was it a U.S. story, but it was an international story. And the interest in the Epstein story continues to grow. Because of having written the book The Spider, I continually am looking at, and there's just so much going on right now here in the U.S. with certainly our election that we're facing shortly. But if you look at Twitter, which has people from all over the world commenting, Jeffrey Epstein, the topic of Jeffrey Epstein comes up repeatedly. I mean, he's always trending. And oftentimes I'll see him at the top of a trending list on Twitter or now X, and I'm thinking to myself, has there been some brand new development that I may have missed? And in fact, there's not some news headline, but the fact that people can't stop talking about his case. They can't stop talking about Prince Andrew. They can't stop talking about Ghislaine Maxwell, who now is rightfully so behind bars. So the interest level continues to soar, and it's not surprising to me that we're seeing multiple treatments of various aspects of the Jeffrey Epstein story. And with Prince Andrew, I'm actually excited over this three-part series, because they may be able to develop it even further than what we saw in the Scoop theatrical version movie. We may get a more nuanced look, not only behind the scenes of the interview, which I think that people in the media, like myself, not only have I worked in print, but I also worked in television for 10 years. And it's fascinating to see all the kind of the backroom dealings that took place to actually get Prince Andrew sitting across from Emily for that historic interview. But we also may pick up some other tidbits and some other details that we possibly didn't know. Both Emily has been involved, and also her producer
Sam,
at who worked with her at Newsnight. She was also involved, and so we not only the men, we were also seeing Prince Andrew's personal secretary, Amanda, at the time, who was part of that negotiation. So it's fascinating to see the interactions that took place to actually get him in front of that camera. And all of it, of course, as this is such a historic case, is historic in its own right in terms of all of the elements that went into bringing Prince Andrew to sit down for that fateful interview.
it's so true. It's so true to find out how that it never happens. Yes. Royal sitting down with anybody seems to always be a last resort. So yes. That there was some air of desperation there when they made that decision. Now, Michael Sheen, who plays Prince Andrew, I think brilliantly in this upcoming A Very Royal Scandal, yes. When asked by People magazine if he'd like to be a royal, he said, absolutely not. He said the fairy tale image of it seems so extraordinary, living in the palaces and having everything you want and servants and all that kind of stuff. But the reality seems to be that there are far more restrictions than there are freedoms. No amount of wealth or assets or privilege can make up for not being able to have the basic sorts of freedoms that a lot of us take for granted. I read that and I think, yes, but I also think Prince Andrew would not have gotten away with this had he not had that his connection to the royal family. I just don't think a typical, you look at Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was only protected so much. It finally broke down. Karma finally caught up to him,
Yes. Yeah, in that sense, Andrew, his whole lifestyle in my book, the chapter that begins on Andrew is called the negative charisma prince, in the sense that Andrew was, and I start that chapter by discussing the SO14, the Special Operations Division of the London Police that were specifically assigned to protection of the royals. And as I write in the book, all of the royals were given special protection, and unfortunately, those special officers who drew Andrew's duty felt that they were the unlucky ones. I mean, nobody wanted to have Prince Andrew duty because he was a character. He would go off on any whim he had when he was invited to, go out clubbing and, in the old days, and carousing, and of course, their duties, of course, took them to Florida for a great deal when he was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, he had said that he spent a limited period of time with Jeffrey Epstein in Palm Beach. What's interesting is and again, we continue to learn new details about the Epstein saga. And some months back, we had a new unredacted documents that were released from a previous court case, in which we learned that Juan Alesi, who had been the house manager for Jeffrey Epstein in Palm Beach, said that not only did Prince Andrew frequently go there for days at a time, but he would actually stay for weeks at a time in Florida at Jeffrey Epstein's mansion in Palm Beach, and that Prince Andrew would receive daily massages. Now, Alesi didn't put that in context in terms of he didn't cite what specific girls may have been involved, but it really showed us in this new court document that was released finally, that Prince Andrew's time there with Epstein, and this is just in Florida, not to mention his time on the island, Jeff Epstein's island, or in the New York mansion, but that in Florida, Prince Andrew practically lived there. And you can imagine what he was getting up to.
Oh my gosh, that is just devastating when it comes to reputationally. Yeah. And it doesn't just affect Prince Andrew, it affects the entire monarchy, which you would think he would be considerate of when making such idiotic decisions and selfish decisions and ruthless and gross. When you really know the heart of some of these people, like Ghislaine calling these young girls trash, it just you're like, how can you associate with them? They're awful people. Now, a report came out just earlier this month in the Daily Mail that the late Queen Elizabeth ignored advice from senior courtiers to suspend Prince Andrew after initial allegations were made concerning his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. And instead of choosing to distance herself, or instead of choosing to punish Prince Andrew or put him on the sideline, initially, she just distanced herself from the courtiers in question. Did you find anything like that in your research, that Prince Andrew was kind of getting away with something, or that there was an effort to protect him?
Well, I mean, there's no question that he exploited, or Jeffrey Epstein, I should say, actually exploited Prince Andrew's position. Epstein loved going to various events in England as a guest. Now, Andrew, for the record, would clarify and say, well, I was always inviting Ghislaine Maxwell, who was one of my, dearest friends, the daughter of Robert Maxwell, the Fleet Street newspaper publisher. That it was that his association was always about his very close friendship with Ghislaine Maxwell. But in fact, it was Jeffrey who took advantage of that relationship and really found Prince Andrew's weakness, which had always been playing around, which had always been carousing, and did everything he could to bring Andrew to Florida. In my book, I talk about the fact that Andrew wanted to go to this crazy club down in Miami, which was attended at the time by cross-dressers. There were kind of some S&M type scenes taking place in the club. Andrew wanted to experience that. He had heard about this club and thought it would be so much fun to go there and party and see all this up close. Because again, living in that bubble, in that royal protected bubble, he was so far removed from all of these things all these vices, I should say, that he wanted to explore. And so Jeffrey Epstein picked up the phone and arranged for Andrew to be a special guest at this wild and crazy club. And Andrew went down to Miami and spent a night there that went into the wee hours of the morning. And Jeffrey knew just from that one particular experience that they would exploit him in so many different ways. And just having that association with Prince Andrew helped Jeffrey Epstein connect with so many other influential people.
Useful idiot. Like, tell me about that. Yes. That's what they called Prince Andrew, the useful idiot.
Yes.
Oh, that's horrible.
But his mother, of course, the Queen, there's no question that behind the scenes, from what we were told, that the Epstein's association with her son was just an absolute embarrassment. There had been nothing more scandalous in their household since Princess Diana's death, and how they dealt with that, and kind of the PR mess that took place in the immediate days after, with the fact that it took a long time for the Queen to finally issue a statement on Diana's passing. But Epstein brought a whole different level of real personal disaster and reputation destruction to the royals, based on not only his association with a convicted pedophile, but on top of that, the actual allegations that were lodged against Prince Andrew by Virginia Giuffre, that the three sexual encounters that took place when she was 17 years old. So this wasn't just a PR disaster, but it had the potential of being a criminal disaster, in the sense, if Andrew was interviewed by authorities, and had he ever been brought here to the U.S., if an extradition had ever taken place, we could have seen some serious charges leveled against Prince Andrew. I think that as much as they say it's independent in England, involving the Metropolitan Police and the royals, there's no question that the Metropolitan Police looked the other way and gave Andrew every opportunity to avoid any direct questioning over there as to his involvement in this with Jeffrey Epstein. As I reported in the book, the FBI and the prosecutors from the Southern District here in New York, who investigated both Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, were efforting an interview with Andrew's people, and the royals continued to say that Prince Andrew would, of course, be cooperative, but he never cooperated in any way in an official investigation. That's why, again, all we have for the record is Emily's interview. And again, if that interview had been conducted now, we would have known so much more about Prince Andrew's involvement than what she had to work with at the time. If you remember, the interview finally came about after Jeffrey Epstein's death, and he couldn't avoid hiding out anymore. So he really was forced to answer questions. But it did take upwards of a year for them to actually, get him to sit down for that interview. And then a lot of that has to do with Emily's producer, who worked that effort to finally bring him to the table.
You've said to me in the past
Yeah.
that if Prince Harry, God, I've always got one black sheep on the brain when it comes to the royal family.
Yes.
You've said to me in the past that if Prince Andrew were to come into the United States, he risks being detained. Do you still feel that way?
I think that while we already have had a conviction with Ghislaine Maxwell, and the, of course, civil trial has gone away based on the fact that either the money, the millions of dollars that were paid out to settle that, either came from a personal family fund of the Queen or of her son, King Charles, that they gave Andrew that money to make it all go away just for the sake of avoiding any more of a spectacle. That even though there's not any active investigation now, I think that Prince Andrew always faces the risk of not only an official interview, but also being hit with a subpoena for potential litigation in the United States by some of the lawyers for some of these other women.
Wow, that's incredible. I know this isn't your beat, so you can just say pass. But one of the stories that I've been having to cover for the last maybe a year now is the idea that King Charles would like for Prince Andrew to move out of Royal Lodge and move into Frogmore Cottage, a much smaller space, because Prince Andrew is contributing nothing, and I feel like he's simply a waste of resources. Knowing what you know and all of the investigating that you've done, do you feel like Prince Andrew's, digging his heels in and staying in this, opulent, extravagant space that was given to him by the Queen before she knew of all of these crazy stories, do you think that maybe it is time that he just put his head down, go to a smaller space, keep your head down, stay out of trouble, and just appreciate the fact that you were, I'll stress, he says he's innocent, but you were able to get away with at least guilt by association, being friends with a terrible human being. Yeah.
I memean, in all essence, he's a squatter in the royal household. He refuses to leave. Charles has been trying to get him out of there, and Andrew has dug his heels in, and he doesn't want to go. There's also the issue of which Andrew's associates have raised, and that is he needs the protections. His apparent now that he has been relieved of his royal duties, the personal tab now on his security services is estimated to be between $3 and $4 million US dollars a year. That's, it's an unbelievable figure to protect a member of the royal family. Although we have seen, we have heard this particular case about the cost of protecting the royals from Harry, who talked a great deal about that when they left for California, in terms of having that round the clock protection. Because again, as a member of the royal family, and with all the terrorism in the world today, there's always that risk of some type of kidnap or being held hostage for something. So of course, rightfully so, Andrew, regardless of
his hobbies,
his hobbies and his
extracurricular activities.
and the allegations, the very very serious and damaging sexual assault allegations against him, he still deserves to have some protection, and it's very expensive. And how that actually relates to his safety and the fact that he may feel more secure where he is. I think these are all questions that that still have to be sorted out at the highest levels. But there's no question that he remains an absolute headache for Charles. Andrew is never going to live this down. With each of these theatrical productions that take place, the new miniseries that's taking place, or the film that's already come out, it just further reminds the public all over the world of this, individual's association with Jeffrey Epstein. So in Charles's lifetime, this will never go away, and his brother will always remain an absolute headache, and could cause collateral damage.
Wow, that's a good way of putting it. I just have a couple more questions, if you don't mind. Is there a way to tell Jeffrey Epstein's story without Prince Andrew? The royal family is famous for making stories disappear or sweeping things under the rug. Was it impossible in this case?
I don't think it was an option in this particular case. This is something that is going to continue, in the sense that this is something that the royals, what remains of the royal family, they're just going to have to continue to live with this for a very long time. And Andrew is still a relatively young guy, in his mid-60s. He still has a long life to live, but he really can't contribute anything to the royal family anymore, and because this will always come back to haunt him.
And how do you write a book that involves negative stories about the royal family's history? Do you contact Buckingham Palace? Are you nervous in this situation? How did you navigate, including Prince Andrew in your book?
Well, I mean, to tell the Epstein and Maxwell story, you had to dig into Prince Andrew. He probably, among all of the famous individuals connected or associated with that couple, he really has kind of become the most famous among the famous, in the sense that there have been no other true allegations made against some of the others in Jeffrey Epstein's orbit among the very rich and famous. Prince Andrew is really the only one who has been actually, sued in court for sexual battery.
Wow. All right. Well, Barry Levine, author of The Spider Inside the Criminal Web of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. It's an amazing read. Get it, audio, physical, get it any way you can. And you have done so much incredible research on this story. You are my go-to when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein, and you've been so thoughtful about the victims in the process of everything you've done too, which obviously I really appreciate. And thank you for doing that in the way that you speak about them. It's always very kind, and you're very protective of them, it seems, in your writing. So thank you for doing that as well. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for talking to me. And you're on my speed dial. Any new Jeffrey Epstein story, I got you on speed dial. So thank you so much for your time.
Call me anytime, and we'll continue this conversation. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Will you be watching Amazon's A Very Royal Scandal? Make sure you let me know in the comments below. Please like this video, share with a friend, and subscribe to Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered. Thanks so much for watching.